My name is Anselm Price, and for 31 years I have kept the inner kitchens of the Aldrich Palace, in the Caliph Dominion, where the Empress lives. I do not say this to claim any importance. I have scrubbed more pots than any man should have to in one life, and I have carried more trays up that long marble stair than I could count if you gave me a year to do the counting. I am 58 years old. My back tells me so every morning. I mention my age only because it matters to what follows. A younger man might not have noticed what I noticed, and if he had, he might not have had the nerve, or the lack of better sense, to do anything about it. The Empress's name is Leora Caliph. She came to the throne when her mother died, 3 winters back, and she has been alone in every way that counts ever since. The Caliph are pale people, lavender-skinned, silver-haired, with eyes that catch the light strangely when they're tired, and hers were tired more often than not. She had no husband, no children, a council that managed her schedule down to the quarter hour, and a small army of physicians and protocol stewards who managed everything else. What I noticed doing my rounds was the trays. Every night her supper went up untouched and came back down the same way, the soup skinned over, the bread gone hard at the edges. The court physicians had a theory. They always have a theory. The first one said her appetite was suppressed by grief and prescribed a tonic. When the tonic did nothing, the next physician said it was stress, and adjusted her broth to a thinner consistency, weighed to the ounce, with a card pinned to the tray noting the exact hour it was to be served and removed. A third suggested music in the dining hall might help, so for a week a string trio played softly behind a screen while she ate alone, and she sent that back untouched too, strings and all. None of them once asked her how she was. They asked her body questions and wrote down the answers her body gave, and they called that care. The protocol around her supper was its own small machine. A steward set the bowl down, bowed, and left within 90 seconds, because that was the rule for an empress dining alone. Nobody was to linger. Nobody was to presume familiarity, not even long enough to ask if the soup needed salt. For 3 years that had been the whole of her evening. A bowl set down, a door closing, nobody asking her anything at all. I am not a clever man, and I want to be honest that what I did next was not clever either. I simply could not stop thinking about a woman eating alone in a room the size of a parade ground, with no one in it who'd ask how her day had gone. So one night I made a pot of barley and leek stew the way my own mother used to make it, in a dented iron pot I'd had since I was a boy, and instead of sending it up through the proper channel, I carried it myself. I told the duty steward I'd cover the delivery. He didn't ask questions. Nobody questions the man who's scrubbed their pots for 31 years. She was sitting by the hearth in her private sitting room when I came in a chair too large for her, looking at nothing. I set the pot down on the low table, and instead of bowing and leaving within my 90 seconds, I pulled up the small wooden stool I use for scrubbing low pans, and I sat. She looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "You're not supposed to sit," she said. "No, Your Grace, I'm not," I said. "I'm not supposed to be carrying stew up here either. I'm a kitchen man. But I kept thinking about you eating that broth alone every night, and I thought, well, somebody ought to ask her how her day went. So, how was your day?" She didn't answer right away. I want to be plain about that. It wasn't a fairy tale moment where she lit up and started laughing. She just sat there a long moment with her spoon halfway to the bowl, looking at me the way you'd look at something you'd forgotten existed. "Nobody has asked me that in 11 years, she said finally. Not since before her mother's illness, she meant, though she didn't say so that first night. She picked up the spoon and ate the whole bowl, and when she finished she asked if there was more, and there was, because I'd made enough for myself and brought it all. I came back the next night and the night after that. I never made it a ceremony. I'd carry the pot up, sit on my stool, and ask her plain things, whether the council had argued, whether she'd slept, whether the leeks were too much for her taste. She started asking things back. What my mother's kitchen had looked like. Whether I had children. I told her I'd lost my wife 11 years back myself. which was its own strange coincidence neither of us made much of, and that the stew was the one thing of hers I'd kept making, because it felt like keeping something of her around. Within 2 weeks the trays were coming back empty. Within a month, the court physician noted in his log that the Empress's color had improved, and her hands had stopped shaking during counsel, and took the credit for adjusting her broth ratio, which I never corrected, because credit was never the thing I was after. I heard later from one of the chamberlains that during a long council session about grain tariffs she'd laughed, actually laughed, out loud, at something dry the Minister of Trade said, and that half the room had gone quiet and stared, because nobody at that table could remember the last time it had happened. The chamberlain who told me this looked at me strangely when he said it, as if he suspected something but couldn't have said what. It was the Minister of Protocol, a narrow, careful man named Ordric Vane, who finally caught wind of it and did not take it well. He summoned me to his office, which smelled of old paper and disapproval, and told me that a kitchen man sitting and conversing with the Empress, unsupervised, for the better part of an hour each night, was not merely irregular but unsuitable, and that I would be reassigned to the scullery on the lower levels effective immediately, where I would have no further occasion to forget my place. I did not argue with him. There wasn't much arguing to be done with a man like that, and I have never been one for it besides. I packed my dented pot and went down to the scullery the next morning, and I told myself that was simply how it had ended, and that I'd at least gotten a few good weeks of it. I lasted 4 days in the scullery before the summons came, not from Minister Vane, but from the Empress herself, in her own hand, which I was told had not happened for any kitchen staff in living memory. She received me in the same sitting room, by the same hearth, and she did not waste words. Minister Vane informs me you were reassigned for unsuitable familiarity, she said. I have informed Minister Vane that the familiarity was the only suitable thing that has happened to me in 3 years, and that he is welcome to find that irregular. She looked at me, and there was something steady in her face I hadn't seen there before, not the tired Empress from the chair, but a woman who decided something. I would like you to keep your post in my kitchens, Anselm Price. And I would like you to hold a new title alongside it, Keeper of my private table. It does not exist yet. I am inventing it for you, because apparently I am allowed to invent things now that I have remembered I'm in charge of this palace. I told her honestly that I didn't need a title, that I'd have kept bringing the stew whether there was a name for it or not. I know, she said, that's why you're getting one. I still keep the kitchens. I still scrub more pots than I'd like. But most evenings now, I carry a small pot up that long marble stair, and I sit on my stool by her hearth, and we talk about nothing important, the weather, the leaks, whatever foolishness the council got up to that day. She still asks how my day went every single time before I can ask hers. I think that's the part that still catches in my chest, all these months later, not that I was the one who finally asked her, but that once somebody did, she never stopped asking back. That, more than the title, is the thing I'd call the real reward if anyone ever asked me to name one. Nobody has, not yet, but I imagine, knowing her, that one day she will.